Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on May 1st, 2023. My name is Elizabeth Nelson, and I served on Ann Arbor City Council from 2018 to 2022. I understand the inner workings of our local government, and I believe that you should too. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on May 1st, 2023. All items were approved unanimously. Ward 3 Councilmember Aisha Ghazi Edwin was absent. You can find this voting chart and more information about this meeting at a2council.com. This week's City Council meeting included 5 public hearings. There were 4 public hearings for adjustments to water rates, stormwater rates, and community and public service fees. Additionally, Council held a public hearing for the city budget. After introductory remarks, public comments, and public hearings, Council discussed agenda items for less than 40 minutes. 13 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 5 people spoke on topics that were part of the agenda. The consent agenda included 11 items and nearly $15 million in expenditures. 2 items were pulled for discussion. Council considered a $2.1 million construction contract for the West Madison Place water main and resurfacing project. This project includes water main replacement, resurfacing, a turnaround at the south end of Madison Place, and a mini roundabout and crosswalks at Madison and Eber-White Boulevard. 3 companies bid on the project. Staff assessed 2 bids, Fonson and Bailey Excavating, as equivalent on price, and ultimately recommended awarding the contract to Fonson. In discussion, Councilmember Iyer criticized the information submitted by Fonson and expressed her preference for Bailey Excavating.
In both RFPs, under a different section, the section for ratio of masters to apprentices, they list more than 24 other employees, none of whom are OSHA certified or will be, according to their own proposals. So in contrast, the contractor who won second place in this bid submitted OSHA certificates for 34 of its employees.
These remarks were the 3rd time that Councilmember Iyer has indicated a preference for awarding city contracts to Bailey Excavating, against the recommendation of city staff. In March 2021, and again in February 2022, Councilmember Iyer successfully amended staff-recommended contracts in order to award them to Bailey Excavating. This week, Councilmember Iyer did not attempt to award the contract to Bailey Excavating, but she did propose an amendment, affirming that Fonson provide evidence of OSHA training for all their laborers. That change was adopted as a friendly amendment without a vote. City Council unanimously approved the contract with Fonson. Council considered a $3.4 million contract for the Brooks Street Improvement Project, which includes water main replacement and road resurfacing, as well as an intersection reconfiguration at Sunset, Brooks, and Vesper. A mini roundabout is planned for Mixed Wood and Red Oak, as well as new sidewalks on both sides of Brook Street, north of Mixed Wood. 3 companies bid on this project. City staff recommended Bailey Excavating, which submitted the lowest bid. Council unanimously approved the contract after 4 minutes of explanation from city staff. 1 person spoke at a public hearing for proposed increases to the city's water rates.
Consider that there's more than one way to make it an affordable community, and one way is to not jack up costs for everybody.
Council unanimously approved a 6% average estimated increase in water rates. No one spoke at a public hearing for a 4% average estimated increase in stormwater sewer rates. After staff explanation, Council voted unanimously to approve this increase. Public hearings for fee adjustments in the Public Service and Community Services departments prompted 1 comment.
Some of these fees are pretty astronomical, and some of these changes are going to benefit people who can afford them, and they're going to hurt people who can't.
Those fee adjustments will be voted on as part of the city budget on May 15th. A public hearing for the city budget prompted 14 comments. 6 people spoke in support of funding next steps for establishing a public utility to replace DTE.
We'd like to put a placeholder in the budget, $250,000, which would go toward the valuation of DTE's assets if the feasibility study, which the council authorized and funded and is expected to be completed in June, looks positive. In other words, if the feasibility study looks positive, then the next step would be to have a more precise valuation done of DTE's assets.
Right now, we're stuck with DTE and they do not share our climate goals. They actively fight the just transition as the biggest lobbyist in Lansing with our money, and there's nothing we can do about it short of severing that relationship.
I want DTE out of here. Please create a $250,000 budget placeholder so that we can take the next step in creating a public electric utility.
Others had comments about parks, policing, the airport, and other issues.
I'm sorry that the Klein lot is no longer being viewed as a site for affordable housing, but rather for market rate housing. I urge you to put money in the budget to clean up the toxins at 415 West Washington Street. This is city property, and the city has known about these toxins for years and has done nothing.
I would like for us not to be increasing the police budget.
I hope City Council will consider removing the proposed Ann Arbor Airport runway extension from the CIP so that projects with much broader community benefit can be moved forward instead, because an extended airport runway will benefit only the very wealthy.
The annual budget will be voted on at the May 15th council meeting. Council considered the issuance of up to $40 million in water supply revenue bonds at an annual interest rate of up to 7%, or the maximum rate permitted by law. This week, staff explained that the city-issued bonds will fund projects that would not be eligible for subsidized bonds through the state of Michigan.
The projects that we've identified for this water revenue bond, again, which are typically water main projects, typically do not score well through the state's ranking system. So we tend not to submit these types of projects with that type of funding.
Council unanimously approved issuing up to $40 million in water revenue supply bonds. Council unanimously approved a resolution updating the function and composition of the Council Policy Agenda Committee. Council then unanimously approved a lease that will allow the organic farming of a 54.3-acre parcel acquired by the city through the Greenbelt program in 2022. The lease will allow it to be farmed for the next 9 months to preserve and cultivate the soil. Council then considered dissolution of the Brownfield Plans Review Committee. This committee reviews developer requests for tax abatements, called Brownfield funds. This public money provides reimbursement to private developers for the cleanup of environmentally distressed properties. Since 2020, City Council has approved $35 million in these Brownfield tax abatements for private developers. Public commenters spoke to the issue earlier in the meeting.
Brownfield plan oversight is critical, not so much the site remediation activities. These are vetted by technical experts, but the non-environmental activities need close scrutiny. Here, the city is using the Brownfield plan not to clean up a site, but rather to advance other goals. But you simply do not have the time or the bandwidth at your meetings to fully vet these complex and opaque plans.
A couple hours a year of oversight and a couple hours a year of listening to public commentary on these sorts of efforts seems like a good investment.
In order to receive reimbursement, developers must submit proposals which are reviewed and approved by both City Council and the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners. The county is discouraged from second-guessing plans that have been approved at the city level. For example, on April 19th, the county board discussed a brownfield proposal for the village in Ann Arbor. They debated the plan for nearly an hour and questioned some of the terms. In response, administrative staff discouraged any changes.
The first stop in any approval is that local unit. We don't ever see a plan unless that local unit approves it. All the kind of the nuance here that we've been talking about was all done at the City of Ann Arbor level.
At this week's meeting, council members suggested that eliminating the Brownfields Plan Review Committee would increase public participation and transparency.
Instead of a small committee that meets, quietly when the public isn't paying attention and, receives the presentation from the developer at that point, that part is going away. The entire body here will receive that presentation from the developer and will be able to consider the plan as a body. I want that substantive discussion to happen here at the council table. And that is where it will happen when we, if this passes and we do dissolve that and bring that discussion to the council as a whole.
This is not going to reduce the level of scrutiny. I think the hope is for this body is that we'll provide better information to the entire body.
Council could still disagree, but the debate can happen at the council table rather than in this commission. So I'll be supporting this.
If we dissolve the review committee, we will eliminate one thing only, which is the inefficient use of a precious resource. And I am talking about the time and effort of our planning staff and development team.
To suggest dissolving this committee removes oversight from the process is dishonest at worst. And at best, it shows a complete and fundamental lack of knowledge around the process itself.
Since the committee is only composed of 4 council members, and there are no members of the public on this committee. No additional expertise is added at that stage. And there's also no way for staff to know if the opinion of those 4 council members represents a consensus opinion of council or even the majority of opinion of council.
Council rules limit the amount of substantive discussion, scrutiny, and debate that can happen in a meeting of the whole council. Each member is restricted in how long and how many times they may speak. In 2021, Councilmember Iyer led efforts to reduce those speaking times further in order to shorten meetings. Significantly, a new rule approved by a majority of council defined both questions and answers as counting towards reduced speaking times. A council member can typically offer either one question or comment during a speaking time, but not both. Earlier in the meeting, Councilmember Cornell experienced exactly this when she asked one question of staff and attempted to follow up.
Stormwater that will then be released into the system that goes directly to the river.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that is your time.
Okay.
But you might get a second shot.
Councilmember Watson also exhausted his speaking time after asking a single question of staff.
But all of those pieces together are what are built into our rate projections.
You have 5 seconds. Thank you.
Council subcommittees like the Brownfields Plan Review Committee are a forum for thorough discussion of issues without these strict time constraints. A subset of 4 or 5 council members regularly provide feedback to staff as representatives of the whole. Every member of council participates in at least one of these subcommittees to consider issues in public meetings with opportunities for public comment and thorough discussion without the time constraints of a regular council meeting. Council unanimously approved dissolution of the Brownfields Plan Review Committee. City Council went into closed session for nearly an hour to discuss litigation and a privileged and confidential legal memo. When they returned to chambers, Council unanimously approved a resolution directing the city attorney to produce a public memo about the recent Ninth Circuit Court decision in California Restaurant Association v. City of Berkeley. That decision set aside local regulation of natural gas connections. To read the full opinion in this case, see the link in the description of this video. The meeting officially adjourned at 10:20 p.m. with no additional public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
We had actually told ourselves how to do that work. And so the review committee was essentially part of the council being instructed by the whole council on what to do to give to the whole council to approve. You see my point. There's a little redundancy, if not a little bit of schizophrenia there. So I shouldn't be light about that. So anyway.